Scream all you want. Die with your baby for all I care. Those were the venomous words hurled at Esha Kamara in the darkest hour of her life. A wife abandoned in labor by the man who vowed to protect her, a mother forced into the cold night when she needed love the most. But what her husband, Daniel Carter, never imagined was that the very woman he discarded would one day rise with a strength he could never control. Tonight, you'll hear a story of betrayal, survival, and a comeback so powerful it will leave you breathless. But be warned, nothing is as it first appears. Every lie, every mask will be stripped away until the truth stands in the open. Before we begin, please subscribe so you never miss stories like this, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, lean in. You'll want to hear every word. The first contraction knifes through Ishi Kamara as rain needles the porch light, and she braces against the doorframe of the small rental, one hand on the swell of her belly, the other fumbling for the deadbolt. Her scissors kit sits by the stairs where she left it after a long day at the salon, and the faint scent of hairspray hangs in the air like static. She calls, her voice tight yet steady. "Daniel, it's time. We need to go." And he steps from the hallway in uniform pants and an open dress shirt, his badge glinting, his jaw already set like a locked door. "Now? Of course it would be now," he says, the words clipped, the tone that of a sergeant dressing down a rookie, and he grabs the overnight bag she packed with baby clothes, tossing it onto the porch where water splashes the zipper. Pain lifts her to her toes, but her mind stays precise. Breathe, count, don't tip, while he points toward the street and says he won't be dragged into one of your scenes, and she hears the soft whir of a phone camera from the dark across the way, where Mrs. Taylor cracks her blinds. "Please, it's coming too fast," she says, and he leans close enough for her to smell coffee and cologne as he whispers, "Scream all you want. I'm not ruining my life for your chaos." Then he opens the door wide and gestures like an officer clearing a crowd. The night wind slaps her cheeks and the porch boards bite through her socks, but she does not break because breaking is a luxury. She forfeited months ago when appointments fell off after the rumor started, and she thinks of the little wooden box in her closet, of her father's looping script, of a promise she hasn't dared open. Mrs. Taylor emerges in a robe, voice small yet cutting through the rain as she asks if everything is all right, and Daniel answers for her with a smile that never reaches his eyes. "We're fine here," while his hand presses the door against Esha's hip, not hard, just hard enough to tell a story. "I need a cab," as she says, and the neighbor nods, thumbs trembling over the screen, because decent people often stop at the edge of discomfort, and Eshi files that truth away like a strand she'll cut later. Another contraction comes like a rip, and she rides it with her teeth set and her spine curved. Then she lifts the bag from the wetboards and says, "I'm going," and Daniel replies, "Good," before he shuts the door, the latch clicking with the cold logic of power. She descends the steps carefully, feeling each riser through her soles, and when the taxi turns the corner, its headlights paint the puddles silver, and the driver ushers her in with quiet efficiency, asking no questions but glancing in the mirror as if to say he's seen worse and better, and both broke his heart. The city slides by in sheets of water, the storefronts slick and the bar signs humming, and Eshi thinks of the salon chair she bought secondhand, of the women who told her she had magic hands, of the rent due in 3 days, of the voice she refused to silence, and she breathes through the next wave while the meter ticks. "Call your husband," the driver offers, and she studies the black screen of her phone, remembering Daniel's precision when he writes incident reports, the tidy boxes he likes to put people in, and she says no, with a calm that surprises her because a door has closed and something stronger has opened. The emergency bay washes her in sterile light, and the air tastes like metal and lemon, and a nurse with quick eyes straps a monitor across her belly while the carousel of beeps begins its fast drum. "How close together?" the nurse asks as she takes the vitals, and as she answers with a wince. "2, maybe 3, then swallows the shame that keeps trying to climb up her throat. The nurse nods and says, "You're safe here," in a voice that sounds like fact, not pity. The room is small but exact. A narrow bed, a monitor bright as a full moon, a chair with a worn arm, a sink that smells of bleach, and a window where rain blurs the city into watercolor. And Ishi catalogs each thing as if knowledge could tether her body to courage. The door swings open, and Gloria arrives in a trench coat, her perfume sweet and unforgiving, her expression set to concern but calibrated toward judgment. And Eshi's chest tightens because mothers are supposed to carry you, not weigh you. I spoke to Daniel, Gloria says without sitting, as if the vinyl might stain, and she continues that he's worried, that Eshi has been having episodes, that stability matters more than pride. And Eshi thinks of how many heads she has held steady while trimming away damage, how many women have trusted her with their image, and how little her mother trusts her with her own story. I need support, not a lecture, Eshi says. Then the contraction hits and her breath shortens. The monitor gallops, the nurse grips her hand, and Gloria laces her fingers around her purse strap like a lifeline. Consider temporary custody, Gloria murmurs, her voice lowering for the nurse as if allies might materialize when you turn down the volume. And as she hears the soft edge of fear under the hard edge of control, noting it the way she notes cowlicks and split ends. Problems to manage, not to worship. Not tonight, as she answers, and the nurse's thumb steadies on her wrist while the doctor arrives, introducing herself as Dr. Ortiz with a smile that looks practiced but sincere, and as she surrenders to the exam because surrender can be strategic. The hours in contract like breath, the monitors sing, the rain dulls, and between spikes of pain, Aishi sees flashes. The shop she wants to open with brick walls and sunlit mirrors, her father's fountain pen, her own hands guiding scissors through a perfect line. Her daughter's face not yet seen but already certain. Her phone buzzes with messages she does not read, and she imagines the narrative blooming online like mold in a damp corner. Daniel's colleagues resharing, acquaintances adding varnish to the lie. And she exhales that thought like smoke and refuses to breathe it back in. Gloria steps into the hallway to take a call, and as she hears the cadence of assurance, the practiced cadence of those who believe uniforms make saints. Yet she also hears the brittle quiver a good stylist always hears at the edge of a laugh, the detail that reveals the whole. The nurse brings ice chips and a joke about hospital gowns being designed by the enemy, and as she laughs because the body needs relief to make room for strength. Then another contraction buckles her, and she grips the rail and says, "I will not break," to the ceiling where the fluorescent hum sounds like a challenge. Dawn blurs into gray when the pushing starts, and every muscle in Esha's body becomes a cable straining against a storm, and Dr. Ortiz counts with a captain's surety while the nurse's encouragement threads between numbers like harmony. As she bears down, hearing saliva crackle in her own throat, tasting metal, feeling time tear and knit with each effort, her mind cuts quick and clean, because that is what she knows, cutting not to destroy but to shape. And she trims away fear with the same discipline she trims a blunt bob. No wasted motion, no apology. Gloria hovers near the sink, finally quiet, fingers working the purse strap into a rope, and when Aishi catches her mother's gaze, she sees not malice but terror, the kind that confuses control with love, and she anchors herself to the difference. Again, Dr. Ortiz says, and Eshe pushes until the world whites out at the edges, until a cry slices the room, high and fierce, and the doctor lifts a slick, furious miracle into the light. Heat floods Eshe's eyes, and she laughs and sobs in the same breath as the baby is placed on her chest, damp and dense and real. The nurse caps the tiny head with a knit hat, and the city beyond the rain feels less like a threat and more like a stage. "Hi, little one," Ishi whispers. And then, because names are scissors for fate, she says, "Amara," and the sound steadies her, and she feels the old fear retreat to the corners where dust collects, waiting for a broom she will gladly wield. Gloria approaches with a halting step and murmurs that they should talk, that Daniel can help with paperwork, that the department's insurance is solid, and as she shakes her head, because safety that costs your soul is just another kind of danger. "I'm here and I won't leave you," she tells Amara, and in that sentence, she hears the seam of her lifter stitched, thread locking in place, not tied tight. The nurse takes a photo for hospital records and offers to text it to someone, and Eshe declines with a grateful smile, deciding that the first image belongs to them alone, not to the crowd, not to the rumor mill, not to the man who locked a door. Outside, the rain thins to drizzle, and Mrs. Taylor posts nothing but saves the clip, unsure why, perhaps because the truth sometimes needs time to grow teeth, and Eshe, resting now, plans silently. Work she can take from home, clients she can rebuild, a paper she will one day sign when the moment is right. She studies the pink face pressed against her and thinks of legacy as something you craft with hands and spine and voice, not just with ink and money. She imagines sunlight on mirrors, the hum of dryers, laughter thick as honey, a child coloring in the corner, while her mother makes other women feel beautiful again. When Dr. Ortiz returns with charts and calm instructions, Eshe listens like a student who intends to exceed the lesson, tucking away details, building a map. She thanks the staff with the clean respect of someone who understands skill when she sees it, then turns to the window where the city brightens, raw and ready. She will need allies and she will need evidence, and she will need patience. But the three are cousins, and she has learned to keep family close. She will cut away rot and keep what's alive, and when the time comes, she will craft a shape that flatters truth. The apartment smelled of talc and damp towels, a scent that clung to the air long after Eshe finished bathing her infant. She balanced Amara on her hip while folding laundry, the cracked linoleum groaning beneath her feet, and each creak reminded her of rent looming on the first of the month. The salon had let her go quietly. No confrontation, just a shift list without her name, whispers that customers didn't feel comfortable with drama. Now she braided hair at her kitchen table for cash, weaving patterns by the dim light of a thrift store lamp, while the baby's small breasts filled the room. A knock rattled the door, and when she opened, it was Gloria standing with a paper bag of groceries, her smile thin, her eyes surveying the peeling paint as if the place itself confirmed her daughter's inadequacy. "Daniel and Vanessa have a new townhouse," Gloria remarked, setting the bag on the counter. "They invited me to see the nursery." As she felt the words slide under her skin like a razor, but she only replied, "Amara has me. That's enough." Her mother's sigh was long and weary, a sound designed to press guilt into the cracks of her resolve. And as the door closed behind her, Eshe's arms tightened protectively around her child. Weeks folded into months and rumors spread quicker than she could chase them. At the corner market, two women she once styled whispered loud enough to be heard. "She threw plates at him. Poor man had no choice." Another added, "He's already remarried. Haven't you seen the photos? Vanessa looks radiant, not like the unstable ex." As she kept her eyes on the apples, her nails biting into the skin of the fruit, reminding herself that dignity meant walking past. But inside her, a knot grew heavy. At night, she scrolled through social media against her better judgment. Daniel in uniform, hand at Vanessa's waist, captioned with words about resilience and love found again. Her chest clenched as she remembered how those same hands once cupped her face with promises of forever. The comments cut deeper than the pictures. Finally at peace. She was holding him back. A real wife, as she dropped the phone onto the couch and whispered to the silent room, "Lies travel faster than truth." The baby stirred and she soothed her, wondering how many years it would take for truth to outrun deceit. One evening, the diner lights burned fluorescent against her eyes as she carried plates heavier than her arms wanted to bear. The smell of grease clung to her hair, mingling with the faint perfume of conditioners from her daytime clients. She smiled at strangers, masking exhaustion that soaked her bones. And between tables, she replayed the rhythm of scissors snipping, the only music she truly missed. Two familiar figures slid into a booth near the window, former neighbors who once envied her marriage. "That's her," one muttered as Eshe set down their drinks. "She looks bitter." The other smirked. "Pathetic. Mark my words, Daniel upgraded." Eshe placed their burgers with hands that did not tremble, but her jaw ached from holding in the fire. When she turned, she caught her reflection in the stainless counter, eyes hollow yet unbroken, and she told herself that survival had a face too, and it was hers tonight. Back at home, Amara's small cry pierced the silence as rain tapped against the glass. As she rocked her child slowly, singing a lullaby her father once hummed, and the memory of him rose vivid, his warm hands guiding hers on a pair of shears, his voice telling her that precision builds confidence. That memory led her to the box under her bed, the one she had carried through every upheaval. She slid it out, its wood scratched but sturdy, and opened the lid with a hand that did not shake. Inside lay the folded trust documents, the ink still sharp, her father's signature anchoring every page. $18 million locked away until she proved her independence, not just as a stylist, but as a woman capable of standing alone. She traced the letters with her finger, the texture of the paper grounding her, and she whispered, "Not yet." The words were not defeat, but strategy. She understood timing, the way a haircut revealed itself only when the last strand fell. She would wait for the final cut. The next morning, Hawthorne's office smelled of leather and old books. The seasoned attorney adjusted his glasses, spreading the trust papers on the polished desk. "Your father anticipated challenges," he explained, his voice steady as oak. "This fund cannot be touched by your husband or anyone else. It's ironclad." Ishi sat with Amara's carrier by her side, the baby cooing softly, and asked, "So all I need is to stand on my own?" Hawthorne nodded. "Demonstrate stability, file proof, and the assets become yours. But patience is key, Eshi. Strike too soon, and it draws attention." She leaned back, the chair creaking, and considered the storm of lies swirling online. Daniel's police connections, Gloria's willingness to echo his version, Vanessa's glossy smiles. They thought she was cornered, yet here lay her father's foresight like a hidden blade. "I'll wait," she said, "but when I move, it won't be small." Hawthorne's thin smile confirmed he believed her. Meanwhile, across town, Vanessa twirled the stem of a wineglass, listening to Daniel complain about shifts, promotions, and how the department owed him more. His voice carried the same authority he once used to silence Esha, but Vanessa felt the cracks forming. She noticed his phone buzzing face down on the counter, his easy grin when dismissing it, the faint scent of perfume, not hers, clinging to his jacket. "Who was that?" she asked casually. He brushed it off with a laugh. "Work. Always work." Yet when he left the room, she unlocked the screen with the code he thought she hadn't seen. Messages from other women spilled across the display, bold and careless. Her chest tightened, not with love, but with recognition. She was not chosen. She was next in line. The realization slid into her like cold water, and for the first time, she wondered what it felt like to stand where Ishi once stood. Gloria, too, shifted uneasily in her quiet house, staring at framed photos where Daniel's arm draped over her shoulder during barbecues, his badge gleaming. She convinced herself she supported him for stability's sake, but doubt gnawed at her edges. A neighbor had shown her the video clip of that night. Daniel shoving Ishi toward the rain. Gloria pressed the screen off quickly, heart pounding, yet the image burned into her mind. She told herself it wasn't the whole story, that Ishi had provoked him. But at night when silence pressed heavily, she heard her daughter's voice cracking in labor and wondered what kind of mother turned away. She clutched her rosary tighter, praying for clarity, though she feared what clarity might demand. As she walked home from the bus stop one late shift, her shoes soaked through, the city's neon glowing on puddles like broken promises, she felt exhaustion gnaw at her spine, but her mind stayed sharp, weaving strands of resolve like she wove braids by day. Lies had painted her as unstable. The world had cheered Daniel's new life, and her own mother had chosen comfort over truth. Yet the box beneath her bed whispered patience. The lawyer's words echoed certainty, and Amara's small hand gripping her finger each night reminded her that strength was not optional. She would endure the whispers, the hunger, the fatigue, because endurance was the currency that would one day purchase freedom. She lifted her chin against the rain and thought, not yet, but soon. Morning heat rose off the boulevard like breath from a beast, and as she watched Carter Global's glass tower throw back the sun as if mirrors could fend off rot, she stood across the street with a stroller beneath a shade tree, fingers resting on the handle while Hawthorne murmured into his phone, his tone low and exact, and she let the building's reflections slide over her like water because she had no desire to be seen yet. The lobby bustled with suits and clipped heels, the kind of stride that pretends risk is a choice. And as she cataloged the polished brass, the revolving door, the security desk with its bowl of visitor badges, then shifted her gaze to the sixth floor, where Daniel liked to hold court in a corner office and pretend the city belonged to him. Hawthorne ended the call and said, "The third tranche cleared. Shells are clean. No one ties it back unless they can read through fog." And as she nodded, adjusting Amara's blanket as if that small domestic gesture could hide the earthquake she prepared, then she answered, "We move again before close. Then we wait." Because patience in salon work taught her that the line you don't cut is as important as the one you do. Across town, Daniel paced a conference room where blinds cut the light into prison bars, barking into a speakerphone about partners who had cold feet, his jaw flexing like it could chew through doubt, and he slammed a thick report onto the table so hard the pens jumped, telling his staff that anyone spreading panic would regret it. An assistant swallowed and mentioned a silent buyer, consolidating stock, and Daniel laughed without humor, claiming no ghost could touch what he built. Yet when the line clicked dead and the room emptied, he stood by the window and searched the street for enemies he couldn't see. As she pushed the stroller toward the bus stop with Hawthorne at her side, and the smell of roasted nuts from a cart twined with exhaust as she pictured the cap table like a braid, strands crossing until they locked. Then she said, "When the board asks questions, I want them answered with numbers." And the lawyer's smile thinned with approval as he replied, "They'll respect math even if they ignore morality." Vanessa met Charles Whitmore at a hotel bar lined in brass and velvet, the kind of place that whispered discretion even as it served martinis, and she entered in a beige trench with her hair pulled into a sleek knot, shoulders set as if carrying an invisible shield. She sat with a practiced smile and said, "I have concerns." And Charles tilted his glass, the ice clinking like a metronome, while he asked if those concerns were married to deliverables. She slid a manila folder across the table and kept her hands steady, because steady hands are how you pass as unafraid. And inside the folder sat supplier projections and tentative contract renewals, not stolen so much as rescued from a fire Daniel had already lit. And she told Charles, "This is smoke. The blaze comes later if someone doesn't check him." Then she added, "I want air when he burns." And Charles said, "Air is expensive, but I like your taste for oxygen." In the townhouse that PR called aspirational, Daniel kissed her cheek and smelled like the wrong perfume. And when she asked casually if his shift had run late, he answered that the department never sleeps, which made her think of how easily men turn institutions into alibis. Later, while he showered, she scrolled his messages and found emojis that did not belong to wives, and her stomach tightened in the way it does before a hard truth, and she closed the phone and stared at the ceiling until she felt nothing but resolve. She didn't consider herself Eshi's ally, not yet, but she recognized the shape of harm and knew it did not change its stripes for a new cage. So when Charles texted a single word, "Useful?" she replied, "More soon," and slid the phone beneath a throw pillow as Daniel returned to the room with steam rolling off his shoulders. Meanwhile, Gloria stood in a church basement stacking chairs after a community meeting, hands moving out of habit while her mind replayed that grainy clip of her son-in-law blocking a door with his body. And when an older woman asked if she was all right, Gloria said she was tired, though the truth was sharper. She was tired of the story she had chosen because it kept her from the one that might free her daughter. As she worked the small apartment like a studio, turning a collapsible table into a station and clamping a ring light to a chair back, and clients returned in twos and threes because beauty lasts when gossip thins, and she braided while Amara napped, her hands flying with the muscle memory of years. Between appointments, she studied filings that Hawthorne sent, numbers marching like soldiers across the screen, and she learned to translate their rhythm into movement, then placed orders with a calm that would have fooled anyone except herself. When the market dipped on a rumor Daniel tried to spin as sabotage, she increased the buy with a steadiness that looked like faith and felt like arithmetic. And she told Hawthorne, "Fear sells cheap," while he replied, "Strong hands collect value." And together they built a position no one expected from a woman whose name had been dragged through mud. Daniel called Gloria for dinner and praised her roast chicken before turning the conversation to concerns about Esha. asking if she'd noticed erratic behavior. And Gloria hesitated just long enough for him to sense her doubt. Then he pressed, telling a story about custody and safety that sounded noble if you didn't know his tells. She nodded for an hour, but when she washed dishes alone, the soap slipped from her palms and clattered against porcelain. And she thought, if I testify, I choose comfort over blood. And the thought made her stomach turn. In the precinct, Daniel moved through the bullpen with a grin that felt stapled to his face, slapping shoulders, promising golf, reminding officers of favors he had done. And when a detective hinted that internal affairs was sniffing around his consulting arm, he scoffed and said IA chases smoke because they can't afford fire. That night, he stood by his office window and phoned a friendly board member, urging a vote to restructure. And the man promised loyalty while staring at the same report Hawthorne had already dissected, a report that read like a slow-rolling avalanche gaining speed. When the first supplier cut terms, Daniel threw a stapler, its metal body denting drywall, and Vanessa watched from the door with her face arranged into sympathy because safety sometimes looks like agreement. She asked if there was anything she could do, and he said, "Smile at the gala and wear the blue dress," then added, "Some of us have real work," which told her everything about value in his private dictionary. She drove to a riverfront park and sat with the engine off while gulls skimmed the water. And she thought of the night she believed herself triumphant, of the ring flash and the photos and the way people congratulated her, as if winning a man's attention were a trophy you could dust. Then she texted Charles a second packet, this one sharper, and wrote, "He's bleeding cash." And when he replied with a simple, "Noted," she realized bargains can be clean if both sides intend to survive. As she carried Amar to the window and lifted the shade to let a blade of afternoon light cut across the room, then she opened her father's letters and read the paragraph where he wrote that dignity is not a posture, but a practice. And she folded the paper carefully and told her sleeping daughter, "We don't beg for seats at tables we can build." The next morning, Hawthorne called with the tone he saved for news that matters and said, "We have the votes to force an emergency session if the trend holds." And Esha exhaled slowly, then answered, "Let it hold, because restraint is also a strike." She replayed the night on the porch, the rain, the words, the door, and felt the scar change texture beneath memory's fingers. Not softer, just mapped. Then she set her kit in its case and zipped the teeth together with a tidy rasp that sounded like readiness. As sun dropped and the skyline went from burnished to black, she stood on her balcony and watched the tower flicker, and she imagined a stage within a stage, gold light and cameras and Daniel's easy smile turning brittle under heat, and she whispered, "Cut clean," the way she does before the decisive snip. Then she went to bed with her phone face down, and the plan sitting beside her like a blade in a velvet sleeve. Golden chandeliers spill light like warm honey across the ballroom, and as she feels the heat of it on her collarbones as she steps from the foyer, her silver gown catching every flash while murmurs roll ahead of her like tide. Waiters float with trays of champagne, cameras wink from the press rail, and a string quartet saws a bright, brittle waltz that makes the air glitter and bruise at the same time. Daniel stands center floor with a broadcaster's grin and a policeman's stance, his hand resting possessively at Vanessa's waist as he tells a reporter that Carter Global is stronger than ever. Then he pivots toward the board table where Evelyn Torres sits with an unreadable gaze, and he says, "We appreciate your confidence tonight." Vanessa's lips curve without joy, her blue dress immaculate as armor, and when she meets Esha's eyes across the room, her smile flickers because recognition is a mirror that never lies. Gloria lingers near the donor wall in a navy suit she ironed twice, clutching a tiny purse like a life ring, while she whispers to a friend, "He's a good man under pressure." And as she catches the tremor in that sentence, the way a stylist hears a snag in a comb, knowing the hair will split if you pull wrong. Hawthorne appears at Esha's shoulder with a calm nod and says, "Board is assembled, projections loaded. If he pushes, we answer." And Eshe feels the steadiness of those words settle in her bones as she moves toward the dais where the quarterly address will begin. Daniel notices the shift in attention, follows it like a predator swiveling to scope movement. And when he sees Eshe mount the step, she laughs into the microphone with practiced ease and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, our evening welcomes all kinds of guests," which draws a ripple of polite chuckles because cruelty often wears etiquette like perfume. Eshe takes her place beside Evelyn. The stage lights warm on her cheeks, and she breathes once through the memory of rain on wood and a slammed door. Then she says, "I have disclosures relevant to shareholders," and the quartet falls silent, as if someone cut the string. Daniel sets his glass down with a clink that carries. Then he signals his attorney, a square-shouldered man in a charcoal suit, who strides to the lectern and announces, "This woman has a documented history of instability, and my client will not tolerate defamatory interruptions." And the first row of donors nod reflexively because authority is comfortable to the well-fed. Ishi feels the room tilt against her like wind on a bridge, yet she keeps her voice level and replies, "We'll let records speak," while Hawthorne taps his tablet and the screen behind them blooms with a clean cap table, tranches of stock crossing like braided light. Numbers fill the space with their cold, precise grammar, and Evelyn clears her throat and says, "It appears a single beneficial owner now holds a controlling interest." Then she turns to Isha and asks, "Do you claim it?" Isha meets the gaze of the room the way she meets a client's eyes before the first cut and answers, "I do." And the murmurs escalate from tide to surf as Daniel's composure tightens into something brittle. "Impossible," he says, smile fixed and eyes hard. "She's cash-strapped. Ask anyone." And Hawthorne swipes again so that another slide opens. Trust documentation appearing with seals that shine like small suns. The camera shutters pop like rain on tin as Eshe says, "My father prepared for men who confuse charm with rights." And the boardroom chairs creak as people shift from disbelief toward calculation. Daniel leans in close enough for the mic to catch the warmth of his breath as he murmurs, "You don't know these waters." And Eshe answers, "I cut straight," while she signals Hawthorne for the next reveal and steadies her hand against the smooth lacquer of the podium, feeling its cool certainty under her palm. Vanessa moves a step forward as if to block a gust and declares, "This is all staged. He's being ambushed." But her voice thins when the screen changes to a grainy porch scene framed by rain, and the room feels that cold night gather, wood slick, light harsh, a man's body filling a doorway as a woman grips a rail. There is no narration, only the image, and the silence that follows becomes an indictment because context can lie, but impact does not. "Edited," Daniel snaps, thrusting a finger toward the projection. Yet the timestamp and metadata sit in the corner like granite, and Mrs. Taylor steps from the press rail without meaning to, her face pale, and calls out, "I recorded it," then flushes and drops back as phones rise to capture the moment that truth grows teeth. Gloria lets a small sound escape her, a cross between prayer and apology. Then she presses it back down with a swallow that looks painful, and as she almost turns to her mother, but stops, because mercy without accountability is just another costume on fear. Daniel's attorney returns to the microphone and warns that the clip proves nothing about corporate governance, which is true as far as it goes. So Hawthorne nods and says, "Then let's speak governance." And with a stroke, the screen floods with emails pulled from archive servers. Courteous language hiding sharp edges as Daniel strategizes to isolate dissenters while siphoning value through consultancy contracts. Evelyn's jaw tightens, and a director in a tart tie mutters, "We signed off on trust," as if policy were a shelter when the storm has already pried up the roof. Daniel laughs, too loud, too late, and says, "Anyone can fabricate correspondence." Yet he doesn't meet Vanessa's eyes because he suspects the next slide will not be his. When it comes, her breath catches despite herself, because the projection shows a thread of messages between her and Charles Whitmore. Nothing explicit at first, only concerns and logistics, then attachments with supplier forecasts and a note that reads, "He won't stop until the house is ash." And she hears her own voice in the ballroom as she says, "I was trying to survive," which is both confession and accusation. Daniel's face goes the color of paper, then red, then paper again. He says through his teeth, "You, with a contempt that folds the vowels into knives, yet Vanessa does not step back, and her hands don't shake as she answers, "You cheated the day after we married," which makes the audience shift toward her because treachery wears familiar shoes. Gloria takes a step toward the stage, as if distance were the only sin she could undo. Then she stops, pressing a folded receipt to her chest, and as she knows what that paper is, even before Hawthorne brings up the bank transfers. Small sums at first, then larger, labeled as consulting, landing in an account with her mother's name. And the room inhales as if it could take back breath and erase choices. "I thought I was protecting Amara," Gloria says, voice shaking but clear. "I told myself stability mattered more than loyalty." And as she holds her gaze a long heartbeat and answers, "Protection doesn't start with payment." Then she turns back to the board because the cut must be clean or the style collapses. Evelyn stands and addresses the room with a measured calm that carries farther than shouting, announcing that, by emergency motion, and in light of newly revealed conflicts, Daniel Carter is removed as CEO pending investigation. And the vote happens in a hush that feels like the pause between thunder and lightning, after which the tally appears on the screen, and the decision lands like a gavel. Daniel staggers, his hand finding the podium, as if it could anchor a man who never learned to float without someone else's breath, and he tries one last line. "Do you want a company run by a stylist with a sob story?" But no one laughs because contempt finally ran out of the audience. Ishi steps forward, the room holding still as if gravity had briefly increased, and she says, "I'm a mother, a business owner in training, and the majority shareholder. I don't need your permission to be capable." Then she nods to security so that two guards escort Daniel toward the side doors, where flashes bloom and questions jab like thorns. Vanessa slips through a different exit, face lifted, surprise pain flickering once before she masks it, and she moves fast, not to escape shame, but to find something that looks like a future she can tolerate. Charles will call, and she will answer, though perhaps not with her heart. Gloria stands alone by the donor wall, the purse suddenly small in her hands, and when she tries to speak, as she lifts a palm and says, "Not here," because healing is not a performance, and some mending demands privacy. The quartet resumes with a softer piece, the room exhaling into the new arrangement of power, and as she thanks Evelyn with a grip that feels like partnership, then steps down from the stage where Hawthorne waits with the quiet satisfaction of a craftsman seeing a blueprint become a building. She crosses the marble, the crowd parting with a sudden, awkward respect, and she reaches the coat room where a stroller sleeps under a textured blanket, tiny breaths invisible but certain. She kneels, presses her lips to Amara's temple and whispers, "No one writes our story but us. This is our beginning." And the words seal something inside her that will not break again. Thank you for staying with us through Ashi's powerful journey of betrayal, resilience, and triumph. What part of her story struck you the most? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below and let us know where you're watching from. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss the next one. Until then, take care, stay strong, and we'll see you in the next story.